Well, hello again and welcome to another episode of the Hyperion Adventures Podcast. I'm Tom. As always, I'm with my wonderful, intelligent, gorgeous, very hardworking Walt Disney and El Grupo loving wife and co-host, Michelle.
Thank you, honey. And hi, everybody.
So good to have you with us. We are recording this episode. Well, this portion of this episode on Sunday, August 18th, 2024. The bulk of this episode, however, was recorded on Thursday, August 15th, 2024. A very notable day that coincides with what we're talking about. We'll get to that in a moment, but really, really cool how this worked out. Right, Michelle?
Oh, my gosh. Yes. It was amazing. And that was neat how the day coincided with something pretty special associated with the topic.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a moment here. But thank you for joining us today. In the future, you can find us most everywhere you get podcasts. However, the very best place to find us is on our own website, HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. Also, we are on social media. We are on Twitter.
Formerly known as Twitter, honey. It's X. Well, it's not triple X.
I don't know if you want to be triple X.
No, it's not triple X.
All the more reason to go back to just calling it Twitter. Not that I've ever deviated from that. But if you want to find us at whatever that is, we are at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. If you are on Facebook, come on over and join us for some good, positive Disney energy fun on our Hyperion Adventurers Facebook group. Also, we are on YouTube, and we are live every morning on YouTube.
We in quotations.
Sometimes we. I mean, we in spirit. Sometimes, usually it's just me, so sorry about that. Sometimes Michelle will pop in for a little cameo, but you never know. But every morning, Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m., Saturday and Sunday, Eastern Time, thank you. Saturday and Sunday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. But it also, you can find it throughout the day. I posted on our social media channels, and it's on YouTube throughout the day. So you don't necessarily need to be up that early to check it out. But if you want to find us, we're at Hyperion Adventures Podcast there. And please like and subscribe that channel. We want to build those numbers up as much as we possibly can.
Right, for sure. Give us the opportunity to do more things.
And today's episode will be a video episode on YouTube. So once you've done downloading and listening to the audio version, go out and check out the video version as well.
Yeah, it'll be good. You'll be glad you did.
You'll be glad you did. Now, before we get one more thing. We also, if you want to contact us for any reason, please hit us up at our Gmail account, HyperionAdventuresPodcast@gmail.com. Now, before we get into this week's show, we are the Disney podcast of positivity. So that means we like to focus on those high moments, those wonderful moments, those positive moments from the week that was. We call it My Favorite Thing from This Week. And when we do this, we always start with Michelle because she's amazing. She's fantastic. She's all things great in the world. She does the best research, although I think our guests today might have a little something to say about that.
Yeah, I think they do the best research.
Yeah. She also has the best list. There may be a touch of that today that you might hear, but she always definitely has the best My Favorite Thing from this week. So Michelle, what is your favorite thing from this week?
Well, I have to say there were two pretty amazing things that happened this week for us. The first one, and hands down, it was amazing for sure. It was the interview that you all are about to hear. That was very special in so many ways. One, the information, but just to have such honorary guests to our podcast was pretty special. And the second thing was we got together with some dear friends that we haven't seen in quite a while. I know you talked about it on this morning's, Hyperion Mornings chat that you do, but we got to meet up with some friends that we haven't seen in a while from Michigan, and that was just tremendously fun.
It was, and that is one of my favorite things. My favorite thing from this week is this interview that we're about to do, or you're about to hear anyway. Right. We did it earlier this week, but you're about to hear. The date that I specified before when we recorded this on August 15th, 2024, happened to coincide 83 years to the day of when Walt Disney left the United States to head down to Latin America for this big tour that we're talking about. It was kind of an amazing coincidence that we were recording it on the same day, right, Michelle?
Right. We have that day because of how it worked with people's schedules, but it is cool that it actually turned out to be a significant anniversary date related to the tour that we're talking about.
And it was such an important, impactful tour that it still reverberates through the Walt Disney Company. I think even today, what all happened during that time, it was such an important, pivotal time for the Walt Disney Company. I think you're going to love this discussion because, one, our guests are amazing. They're great guys. They were a lot of fun during this interview. They have a ton of it, like so much information. We didn't even get to all the questions we had.
No, not even, we didn't even scrape the surface.
This is over an hour interview. We did not get to all the questions we had for them, but they had just such amazing, fascinating, wonderful information.
And stories.
That it just really carried through. And we think you're really, really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll get to that in just a second here. Yes. Also, our friends visiting. So much fun yesterday. That was another favorite thing. And we also somehow jammed in my family college football pool, where we all draft our own college football schools and follow them throughout the football season. And the ones who end up with the most total wins at the end of the year end up winning a big prize and a trophy and everything. And that's always fun every year as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So love that.
But we need to get to this week's show because you're going to love it. It's great. And you're going to be fascinated by what they have to say. So we do have lots of stuff for you coming up after this, with including Food and Wine Foodie Guide. We're going to be discussing that a little bit as well. Peter Pan's flight reopens with some changes. We'll tell you all about that too. And we, of course, have another in our segments of the year of Lynn that we need to discuss as well. But that's later. Let's get to the meat of it. Let's get to the good stuff here. Let's get to today's main topic of the week.
O Brasil samba que dá bamboleio que faz gingar. O Brasil do meu amor, terra de Nosso Senhor. Brasil, Brasil pra mim.
So before we bring on our guests, let's talk about this book. It's actually a monograph is what they call it. It's a little bit smaller than a book, and it's more pinpointed to a single subject. But it's really, really this beautiful, beautiful piece of art. I'm going to call it art because it's
Agreed.
Fantastic. Yeah. But what it is it's all about Walt Disney and El Grupo's trip to Latin America. Right, Michelle?
Right. And it's really like definitive information, and it contains not only details of each day of the trip, the different groups that when they ended up separating and going to different areas, but it also contains so many amazing pictures that really capture what was going on at the time.
And especially fascinating because you're talking about back in 1941. I mean, it's 83 years ago. I mean, this is a long time ago, well past our lifetimes of what happened and how there was so much going on within the Walt Disney Company and the world at that time that it was a pivotal. I've said it a few times. I'm going to say it again in this interview. It was a pivotal time for the Walt Disney Company and U.S. relations with the entire world.
Exactly. And if you've seen the documentary that's on Disney Plus, that one of our guests created that documentary, but if that you do get a lot of the historical what was going on. What's really unique about this monograph is how it brings insights and collaboration effort from three amazing historians, Disney historians, in telling the story and sharing some other details that you might not be able to really appreciate on the big screen.
Completely agree with that. So let's go ahead and get those guests in here. We don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Don't want to keep them waiting any longer. Let's go ahead and get to our guests for today's show. So excited. So very honored that we have the guests that we have with us today, right?
Oh my gosh. Words can't even put it into perspective.
Yeah. So we've been building to this for a while, and we couldn't be more thrilled because we're excited to discuss the Hyperion Historical Alliance's newest publication. It's a monograph, which is entitled Walt Disney and El Grupo in Latin America. Michelle's got it right here for those of you watching it on YouTube. It's a beautiful 230-page publication. It represents the most thorough account ever put into print of Walt Disney's famous 1941 Goodwill tour to Latin America countries. We're delighted to bring the most incredible authorities to discuss that with us today. Sure. Absolutely, right? For those of your listeners who were lucky enough to attend D23, you may have seen all three of our guests. They had a panel together, or maybe you made it by the Hyperion Historical Alliance's booth. They were there very often, selling their book, signing the book, showing the book. It was really, really cool. Wearing boots. Love those boots. So let's go through who we have with us today. We have, first of all, Ted Thomas, who's an American film director and producer. His films include Frank and Ollie. You may know that one, at which his father, legendary animator Frank Thomas, was featured, as well as his documentary Walt and El Grupo, about this famous trip we were discussing today. J.B. Kaufman, he is a film and animation historian. He's authored numerous books, notably including books about the making of Snow White and Pinocchio with David Gerstein. He authored, with David Gerstein, he authored Taschen's book, Mickey Mouse, a few years ago, and he's got a new book coming out that we're very excited about, Donald Duck. We may have to ask him about a little bit about that as well as we get through this. And also we have Didier Ghez, who is also an author and historian. He edits the Walt's People series featuring interviews with historical figures associated with Disney. He also authored the multi-volume series They Drew as They Pleased, featuring some of Disney's studio concept artists throughout the years. Gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperion Adventures podcast.
Thank you, Michelle and Tom.
Yeah, good to be with you.
We're so honored.
Completely honored. Thank you so much. This is just a real treat for us, for sure. Right, Michelle?
Gosh, yeah, we love Disney history. We love the works that you all have produced already, and we're just excited to be able to have this opportunity to speak with you.
So you look like you've... Thank you. You look like you've mostly made it okay from your D23 adventure over the week. And I know, Didier, you have a little bit of a cold, but it looks like you survived the weekend all right.
Yeah, that's right. It was intense. But yes.
Well, I'm just glad. It looked like you had a very popular booth, and it looked like from all the pictures we saw on social media that this book was a real hit for sure. And we know why, since we have it, and we've been able to check it out as well.
Yeah. So I guess before we really get into the book, we would like to hear a little bit more about the Hyperion Historical Alliance. So Didier, could you tell our listeners a little bit about the background of the HHA, we'll call it, and how it was impactful in this project, as well as some future telling of Disney history?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to tell you the story in a nutshell. About 15 years ago, a little bit more than 15 years ago, I started realizing that the historians who had conducted interviews with Disney artists in the 60s and 70s were honestly not getting younger. And also a lot of the artists who had worked for Disney and even their sons and daughters were not getting younger. And the risk there was that a lot of the historical knowledge that they had gathered, either interviews or in terms of documents like photographs, artwork, and so on and so forth, and even written documents, especially written documents, would get lost the day when they disappeared. And so I started realizing that there was a rush against time to preserve all of those documents, and that needed to happen quickly. But I also realized that there was no way I could do that alone, and that would have been really crazy to think that. And so we started organizing a network with other historians, and JB is one of them, and James Pierce and Paula Stigman-Laurie and many, many others. We started organizing that network to work together to preserve in digital form those documents that both the families of the artists and the historians had in their houses and that had not been digitized and that were not at the Disney archives. And we made great progress there. And so that's the hidden part, in a way. That's the hidden part of the iceberg. That's the Hyperion Historical Alliance. Well, at some point when the alliance was created and well underway, and we had started gathering really huge amounts of material and really stuff that no one had seen before, and that was really filling important gaps in terms of Disney history, we started thinking, okay, it's great to have all of those preserved, but now we need to share those with the larger audience. But we need to do that putting them in context. And so what JB, what Jim Holyfield, what others from the board suggested is, well, why don't we launch a publication project? And the publication project took two forms. One, we started releasing a magazine, a journal on a yearly basis, which is the Hyperion Historical Alliance Journal, with very in-depth articles about various aspects of Disney history that had not been discussed before, and with very detailed reference to sources and new material and new documentation and so on and so forth, written by our members. And then in parallel to that, we approached the Walt Disney Company to tell them, well, would you support us if we launched a series of scholarly books, which are really a series of monographs, books about a very specific subject each time, a niche subject, the type of books that Disney Editions would never release because they're too niche, but that would explore aspects of Disney history that had not been explored in depth before. And fortunately, they surprised us by saying, yes, we will support you if you do that. And that was sort of a miracle from our standpoint. And so that's the series that was launched in 2019 with J.B. Kaufman, The Making of Walt Disney's Fun and Fancy Free, which was the first volume in the series. That carried on with the volume that was released I think last year or 2 years ago, which is the origins of Walt Disney's True Life Adventures by yours truly. And the third volume has just been released 3 weeks ago, which is the one you showed earlier, which is Walt Disney and El Grupo in Latin America by Ted Thomas, J.B. Kaufman, and myself, a joint project. And we have many, many more volumes scheduled. And if we have time at the end, we'll be happy to discuss a few of the future projects.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. I want to hear more about that. We got the True Life Adventures one too, as well, when we picked that up. Yeah. So we're really enjoying both. We just had them for a couple of days, but we're leafing through it, and it's really, really great stuff. Both those monographs are fantastic. So let's talk about this. So you've all approached it. JB, you already wrote a book on this subject that we're talking about today. Ted, you did the documentary, which is fantastic. And everybody, you can find it on Disney Plus right now. You should check into that as well, along with the book, the monograph, excuse me. And then Didier, you were doing some stuff on the side as well to kind of get this thing together. But how did it work you decide that, you know what we could do? We need to get this all together. Maybe one of you could tell us what was the process of you joining forces to create this wonderful, wonderful monograph.
Well, we each realized we had a part of a puzzle. I mean, Didier has this fantastic overall view of Latin America, having lived there and worked there and collected journalistic articles over a period of time. I had this abundance of visual material that I had researched thoroughly and was not able to use all of it in the film. And JB, of course, had done this great book. And so I would guess what sort of pushed us over the edge was that Didier also was contacted by the son of Larry Landsberg, who had been on the trip, who wanted to share his own treasure trove of photographs. And we realized, there's enough here that we really need to take the next step and put it all together, because JB and I in particular realized that we had not told as complete a story as we would like to.
In a way, this monograph is a product of the pandemic, because while there, it was difficult or impossible to get into the archives. But the three of us realized that we each already had existing research files on this subject, and if we pooled our research, we could come up with a more detailed account than any one of the three of us could have done on our own.
And we wanted to include the correspondence, the diaries of the members of the trip. We wanted to really bring all of this to life, and also, frankly, we were, I think, all curious to study the trip, not just overall, but day by day. And by doing that, by studying a subject day by day and really in depth, you start seeing where the gaps are. You start seeing where the inconsistencies are. You start seeing where you need to correct the narrative to make it more accurate. And it's just it. And obviously, you start discovering new documents. You start discovering new things, and that's obviously what happened when we were working on this monograph.
For sure. So, considering you all have told this story, JB, you already told the story in a book, and Ted, you had the documentary. So now, what is the new message? I mean, I know there's new material that you came across, but what do you'd like readers to take away from this that is more unique on this particular monograph than what has already been told?
Well, for me, it was to dial up the whole human aspect of the story, because it was so much more than a research trip. Granted, this was the first time that they went out in the field and researched something they were later going to turn into a film. But that's not even, well, it's not the half, it's not even the third of it. Then there's also the geopolitical side of it, of the US government hoping that by sending a bunch of artists to Latin American countries, that they would be able to actually create some goodwill and blunt the inroads that the Axis powers were already making in those countries. And lo and behold, it worked on both of those. But what has always fascinated me is the human legacy of it.
We lost Ted.
Technology, gotta love it.
Well, while his connection is being reestablished, I can tell you from my point of view, I had written a book earlier, but my book was about the whole arc of Disney's Good Neighbor project, including the making of the films, which to me is just utterly fascinating, has always been fascinating. But so this trip that El Grupo made in 1941, that was just the first chapter. So when I was compiling my own research files, when you're researching a book, I always tell people that writing a book about a subject is just an excuse to do the research, because that's the fun part. So I had actually compiled a kind of timeline of the trip, just for my own purposes, and based a lot of it on the itinerary that John Rose submitted to the coordinator's office after they got back from the trip, but fleshed it out with other material as well. So I had a bit of a framework there already. But this was an opportunity to just single out this particular part of the story and then really delve into that in detail. And I had some of those details, but again, Didier and Ted each had other details that they had turned up. So this was a chance to sort of collate all that stuff together and come up with a much, much more detailed picture of what was going on every day of the trip.
From my standpoint, I mean, the whole impetus was to say, I want to travel with them. And if I had a chance to recreate that trip, I would, if I could take a time machine and go back there, I want to really understand where they were when. And because obviously there is no time machine, the best way to do that is to visually speaking, present the trip day by day and use all of the photographs that we can find, or at least the ones that are the most representative and that we had not seen before, and therefore use those as our time machine. And then also, instead of having the overall view of the trip like we have in JB's book, which is obviously was the inspiration for this, or in Ted Thomas's movie, which gives us not only the overall picture of the trip, but also what the places look like today. In this case, the idea is to say, well, what exactly did they do, and when did they do it, and what did that mean? And obviously, you have time. You have the time that you don't have in a movie. You have the time that you don't have in a book that's about the making of Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros, to really go detail by detail, day by day, and really understand exactly the people they met, and really understand, and that then establishes the foundations. And obviously we had our great art director, Steve Reeser, who designed maps and more maps and more maps to really guide us throughout the trip. And so when you have the photographs, when you have the correspondence, when you have the diaries, and when you have the maps, then you're like, now I get it. Now I really understand how that trip worked day by day. And then you're like, okay, and so what happened next? But you already understand what happened during that whole trip. And so instead of going from point A to point C, you really dig into point B in detail. And then you have the impression that you understand the history the way it should be understood. I think that's from my standpoint. And Ted, obviously, you broke off at some point. So if you want to maybe repeat what you were saying so that they can edit it in later on.
Well, yeah. For me, I'm sort of elaborating on what Didier pointed out, but for me, the human connection was the most important part of me to bring that out, because in a film, you are at the mercy of time. You're basically taking an emotional journey at the mercy of time. And what I like about working in a book form is that it's more tactile and contextual. It's between two covers, and you can reflect on where you are and where you're going and where you've been. You can do it all at the same time. And I would really encourage people to read the endnotes in this book, because as we were batting chapters back and forth, we realized that there are all sorts of things we wanted to elaborate on. And it was not possible to do that in the body of the text itself. So we really took these wonderful side trips in some of the endnotes where I think we were able to amplify a lot further about like the family stories or the backstories of some of the people who were involved.
Yeah, I mean, just from my reading it, that's what I really appreciate from it. You get all the complete story for each day. First of all, the phenomenal amount of people that they did visit, how they really did delve into learning about the cultures and the people. But from their perspective too, like where you have excerpts from letters that they wrote to home or whatever. And like you pointed out of the maps, because I found myself too, like, okay, they went from here to here. Where's that? Oh, wait, there's a map right here on the same page. So it really gives clarity and actually more appreciation for what they were experiencing, with whether how far they had to travel, or just how many people in one day, how many organizations or press releases they had to do. Mind-blowing, just mind-blowing. And I think this format really gives you that opportunity to see that and experience it and really appreciate what this tour was about.
Mm-hmm.
If I may tack on to what Didier was saying about the maps and about our designer, Steve Reeser, he is a brilliant designer. He's our not so secret weapon. If you look through the monograph, you'll see just how gorgeously designed it is. That is Steve's work, and I like to think it really does a good job of what Didier was saying, just recreating that experience, so that you could really feel that you're traveling through South America with these artists.
Yeah, I mean, especially because like we are planners, we plan trips, especially like Disney trips, obviously, because obviously we love our Disney stuff. And when we do it, we lay things out day by day, and it feels like, as Didier pointed out, I believe, that it feels like you're going along with him on this trip, because the whole itinerary is laid out from day by day process to maps, as Michelle was talking about, and then the photographs to go along with it. It's just such an easy breeze through. I mean, there's so much detailed material there, so much stuff that you could really use for research. And at the same time, it's also like, it would be a great coffee table book, because there's so many great photos and everything. It really hits on so many different levels that it makes it that much better, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Couldn't have said it better.
We're trying to help you sell it. Sell that book.
It's a great book.
It really is.
It's not something that I want to just rush through from start. I really feel with it, feel with the story. And like I said, appreciate so much more how, like I mentioned, that they did an enormous amount of work, but also to get their perspective throughout the book. You're getting not just this is what happened on day 1, day 2, day 3, but giving feedback of, oh, this is how, from the people who were there, this is how I perceived it, or this is what I experienced, or this is how I felt. And I think those are all really rich elements to have to be able to appreciate the story.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely right. And this goes to one of the principles that I've shared with a couple of people in the past when they ask, so how do you write those books, and what's really important for you? And so I tell them, well, those books need to have a good balance between broccoli and chocolate, and so that usually generates a stare, which is like, what is he talking about? And what I mean by that, I usually say that in those books that I write, or that JB and Ted and so on write, for each paragraph of broccoli, you need 2 paragraphs of chocolate. And again, I get that stare, which is, what are you talking about? What I mean by that is basically that when you write a book, there are hard facts that you need to transmit to your audience, obviously, and very specific facts that are important to tell, to give the context and to establish just what happened. And so that's the broccoli. That's the stuff that needs to be there. But then for it to be enjoyable to read, you need to have either chocolate or the spoonful of sugar, if you want to quote Mary Poppins, which are the quotes, which are the fun facts, which are the anecdotes, and so on and so forth. And so when you have enough good quotes, if you have enough good anecdotes, if you have enough fun stories, then people don't even realize that they are eating some broccoli in the middle. But that obviously the broccoli is critical to the balanced diet of a good book.
Hope you don't mind, we're going to steal that for you.
Sure. Giving you full credit, of course.
If I may, I agree with everything that Didier just said. However, for the record, I really like broccoli. So for me, it's a win-win.
For me, I haven't tried chocolate dipped broccoli yet. I don't really, I'm not sure I plan to.
Oh, I'm French. I wouldn't mix the two. Separate those.
So Ted, before technology, going back to the broccoli portion of it, before technology kind of cut you off there, you were talking about a little bit something interesting as far as this trip, that, obviously there's so many things that play into this, including the geopolitical climate of the world at that moment and what was going on. And part of the reason, or most of the reason, why Walt Disney and El Grupo were even down there. But there were other things going on with the Walt Disney Company too, as far as there was the strike going on. The Walt Disney Company as a whole wasn't just exactly doing super well financially at that moment. So I don't know, maybe JB can chime in on this too. But this was a really, really important and maybe a pivotal moment for the Walt Disney and the company as well.
Well, I don't think it's overstating the case to say that the company was closer to bankruptcy or to going out of business than it ever was at any other time in its history. I mean, with they had this enormous success with Snow White, and then the assumption was that everything was, grand and glorious after that, but it's hardly the case at all. There was a constant hemorrhaging of cash from that moment forward. And 38 was a pretty great year, and 39 they moved into the new studio, but 39 was also when warfare began in Europe, and that cut off the box office, so there was no revenue from there. And when they were released domestically, neither Pinocchio nor Fantasia made their money back. And Bambi came out after the start of World War II, but by the time it limped into the theater, nobody was interested in seeing it. And then, as you pointed out, the the strike occurred in the middle of this too, when you had people wanting representation from a union, which also they wanted job guarantees when the studio was having a very hard time even making payroll. So the fact that they were able to take this trip and then get loan guarantees at the bank that allowed them to make films really provided a financial lifeline to the studio at a critical time.
So, I know that each of you had some information, but you also did extensive research for this. So, what I'd like to know is could each of you share a moment of when you were doing your research that you really just felt like that kid in a candy store? And what was it about that moment that made it so special?
Sure, I can start if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
So I had, when I started that project, I actually wasn't at all expecting to work on a book about the 1941 trip. And the reason why I wasn't expecting that is I was conducting some research about a trip that Walt Disney had conducted to when he had gone to Ireland in 1946. And I knew that on that trip, Larry Landsberg had been on that trip. And so I contacted the son of Larry Landsberg to ask him if he had any photographs of his father in Ireland. And he said, "Yeah, I have that, and I have a few other things, and I'm going to send you a box with that material." And when I received the box, I realized that there were 15 to 20 photos of that trip to Ireland in 1946, which I'd never seen before, and I don't think that anyone had seen before, frankly. But then in that box, there were about 300 photos of the 1941 trip. And so, obviously, excitedly, I contacted JB and Ted, and I said, "Guys, imagine what just arrived." And I scanned all of that, sent that to them, and that was sort of the initial impetus to revisit the work that they had done.
I think, well, one of my candy store moments came from a fellow member of the HHA, Jim Hollyfield, he's my co-editor on the publications projects, and he is really a sharp historian in his own right. You're going to be hearing more from him, but he has a wonderful collection of material focused on Jack Cutting, who you may know was an animator at the studio and then got into many other roles. And he was one of the members of El Grupo. And long story short, one of the many things that happened while they were in South America was that Jack Cutting was overseeing the recording of Spanish and Portuguese tracks for some of the other Disney films. And Jim had this wonderful collection of photos of Jack Cutting and the local talent recording the Spanish soundtrack of Dumbo in an Argentina studio.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that was a real eye opener because it tied in with my own research on Dumbo. And it's pretty wonderful. A lot of people don't realize that. You remember the gossipy elephants in the circus? You didn't hear their names on screen, but they all had names. And I mean, they were identified that closely by personality. So when Cutting was there, he and some of his contacts there actually cast those roles with specific Argentine actresses, and you see them recording the dialogue for the film. And to me, it's one of those side roads that you might not even think of, but it highlights the immense variety of activities that Disney was conducting at the time of this trip.
You know, for me, I had so many epiphanies when I made my film, Walt and El Grupo, that I didn't expect to be surprised that much when I revisited the trip. But I have to say that my candy store moment was unraveling some mysteries of dates that were still outstanding because, I had done a pretty thorough day by day divvying up of the photographs, and JB had the day by day itinerary that John Rose had constructed largely after the fact because he had to do a report to the coordinator's office about what they did. And so he had some of it written down. He was present for some of it. He asked other members, "Well, what did you do that day?" And that's our basic touchstone for what occurred during the trip. And then those gaps were filled, and if there were any gaps, they were filled in by letters or journals. Uh, a couple of things that had never quite sat right for me was to figure out, once we learned that there was this Dumbo recording session, well, when did it take place? And by having that photographic record, then we were able to pinpoint the exact dates when it had to take place, because Chuck Wolcott, the musician, was present for that, but we know he got on a plane on such and such a date to go to Santiago. And we also knew that Jack Cutting flew back to Rio de Janeiro to be on loan to the film industry there. And so we were able to target very narrowly when this recording session had to happen. And my other great moment that I really enjoyed was there was a photograph in the photo archives that was captioned back in 1941 of my father, Larry Landsberg, and Jim Bodrero leaving Salta, because they had gone on to this side trip from way up in northern Argentina to study gaucho lore. And it said it was taken as they were leaving Salta. But here they were in suits, and I knew that when they had done the research, they had been way out on the camp and riding horses, and there weren't even roads going out there. And I thought, they're really pretty much duded up just to get on a plane to go to Santiago. That doesn't feel right. Well, in the course of the research, we also found a photograph that had three of them photographed at the little airport in Cordoba, and they were all wearing gaucho wear, the boots that I had on the other day, and bombachas and coats and the hats and things. And I thought, this just smells a lot more like this is what they were wearing when they were leaving Salta. So we got that worked out and swapped them. So when they leave Buenos Aires, they're in suits. When they leave Salta, they're dressed like gauchos. That was my candy store.
I love it. Oh, by the way, go on to the Hyperion Historical Alliance's social media page and find Ted wearing those boots, because it's gold. He looks great. He is wearing those boots. I'm telling you, they look great. They look great.
He's the man. To understand this, if you may already have seen this if you've been reading the book, but to understand this, you have to understand that the itinerary gets a little complicated, because El Grupo all went together to Brazil, and then they all went together to Argentina, to Buenos Aires. But before they left there, they started to split up into smaller splinter groups. So the group that Ted was talking about went to Salta, while another group went to Bolivia and Peru, the Lake Titicaca region, and Walt and his party made a separate trip over the Andes to Santiago. So for a while, El Grupo was just kind of scattering into various places, and that's what complicates the story, and that's why John Rose did an admirable job of reconstructing the trip. But he couldn't be in all of those places at once. And there were some occasions when he missed something. And that was the kind of thing. And my hat's off to Ted for figuring this out. But he was the one who figured out some places where Rose made, he gave it the old college try, but he missed a few details about who was where at any particular time. And we were able to straighten that out and give the full account in the monograph.
And Tom and Michelle, I'll just add one thing, which is I had one other aha moment, but I'll ask you to ask me about it when we were at the end of talking about the 1941 trip, because it leads into what comes next.
Oh, I love a tease. I love people, something that keeps people listening. Didier is doing our job for us. Thank you, Didier. I appreciate that. See, you want to stay tuned. We got some interesting stuff coming up for sure. Didier, while we're talking with you, so from what we understand, you did a lot of the international research in trying to get some of these facts for this monograph. Was there anything that you've kind of ran into a challenge trying to get some of these different items or different facts for this book? Are there anything that you found that you're like, wow, I was not expecting that? Putting off what you're going to talk about later.
Well, not too many challenges, because one of the things I've become pretty good at over the years is building a network everywhere, and having people on the ground helping to find documents. And obviously, Ted had also built a network in Argentina and a few other places, so those people really helped us. On the Brazilian part, the person who most helped us is a good friend of mine, and has been a good friend for 20 years, called Selby Pegoraro, a historian in Sao Paulo, whom I met in person a couple of times when I was living in Sao Paulo at the time. And he has written a fantastic book about Walt Disney and Brazil, which hasn't been released yet, but it's a fantastic manuscript that really deserves to be released soon. I hope, Selby, if you're hearing that, please hurry up. And so he helped locate quite a few articles in Portuguese, which I then translated to English. And then obviously we had, both Ten and I had some good contacts in Argentina, who sent us not just articles about the stay in Buenos Aires, but some articles about some of the side trips to some regions of Argentina that filled some really interesting gaps. And you have also translations of some of those articles that are included at the end of the book, or that help fill some of the, or give a bit more life to some of the sections in the monograph.
Since we're talking about the international component of it, Ted, I believe I heard you one time speaking about how what you identified when you talked to a lot of people, that it wasn't just the people who met with El Grupo, but their descendants heard about this, and that it was something that was actually very cherished by the people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was very impressed at how present and vivid the memory of this visit was. You know, it'd be like, okay, it's hard to know what to compare it to, but the Disney artists coming to your house or meeting them at that time was a real wow moment for just about everybody who met them. And naturally, the people that I spoke with when they met them, they may have been 10 years old, and now they are in their 70s when I made the film. And yet they are talking about these stories as though they happened not 60 years before, but maybe 6 months before, you know. And like I said, even the next generation, you know, there'd be the grandson of Ari Barroso, the composer in Brazil, you know, spoke about, oh, well, you know, Walt Disney changed my family's life, you know. It made it possible for me to go to dental school, because suddenly my grandfather's song was not just a Brazilian hit, but an international hit. And it was largely because of its use in a Disney film. And in the case of, you know, Jorge Delano, who I worked with in Chile, his father was Jorge Delano, and his grandfather was Jorge Delano. And his grandfather was the host. And his father was like the tour guide, because he was something like 20, 21 at the time that the group was there. And then the fellow I interviewed for my film, Jorge Delano, he went into animation largely because of this trip and hearing about this trip as he was growing up. And he had this suitcase of ephemera and photographs that he brought out when we came to do our filming. And he said to me, "I'm so glad you were here, because this suitcase has been waiting for you."
See, to understand the excitement that Walt and his artists created everywhere they went, you have to remember that that Walt was probably at the height of his international influence then. His films were popular at the box office, but he was also the darling of the intellectuals because the just the sheer amazing quality of animation that his studio was producing, the fact that they had revolutionized this art form so much. Uh, one of the people who did advanced research before they went on the trip reported that in South America, Walt Disney wasn't regarded as a filmmaker like Cecil B. DeMille. He was regarded as one of the great artists, and that was the international sentiment. So when he and his group arrived at any of these places, there was a real palpable excitement in the air that that these artistic icons were coming to visit them.
And from what I understand, this wasn't the first time the U.S. government had tried to send some celebrities and some other people down to Latin America to try and spread the goodwill, but they didn't really have quite as much success, did they, gentlemen?
It didn't always work out well. No, no. Some of them created more ill will than goodwill. So it was a whole different story when El Grupo showed up.
And person after person said to me what differentiated El Grupo from previous visitors was that the Disney artists were genuinely interested in their culture and their stories.
Yes. That comes out very well in the book, too. But yeah. Can each of you maybe, I know you've shared a lot already, but maybe what was your favorite either anecdote about this or discovery that really stood out for you during your process here? Ted, you still look like you're thinking maybe. JV, do you have anything off the top of your head?
Oh, it's hard to pick out just one, actually. I really, I guess, I guess the experience of their experience of being in Rio, because they had just, Ted was talking about the hard times at the studio because there was a lot of tension going on there. And the fact that they were getting away from there and going to this beautiful place, when they step off the plane in Rio, there's just this feeling of exhilaration that that they are there for a specific mission, backed by the government. They're also there for a specific purpose for the films that they're planning to make. But at the same time, there's just this wonderful excitement of being in this vivid, colorful place. And see, this is for me. This is one reason why I love to keep the whole arc of the Good Neighbor Project in mind, because the films that came out of this, they literally started working on what became Saludos Amigos the minute they got back. And when you see Aquarela do Brasil, that segment of Saludos, to me, that excitement and that exhilaration are just palpable. They're embedded in the film, and to see the photos and to read the first person accounts of the group as they were arriving and discovering this, that just kind of amplifies that whole feeling. I guess if I had to pick out one favorite part of the whole project, that might be it.
Well, I would echo that, that my favorite film to come out of this entire period, whether it be Saludos Amigos or Three Caballeros or the planned third film that was never realized, was the freshness and originality of Aquarela do Brasil. And I think that's in part because for Chile, in any case, they already had a story that had been in development about an airmail plane over the Rockies. So it wasn't too much of a stretch to transfer that to going over the Andes. And in the case of Argentina, doing something with gauchos seemed fairly obvious because there was a corollary with the American cowboy. So that felt like a natural fit as well. In Brazil, there was the problem that the officials in Brazil, the governmental officials in particular, did not want them to research stories about tradition or folklore. or they didn't want it to be about the past. They wanted it to be about modern Brazil. So this put the artist, actually, it was a sort of a roadblock that was a good thing for the artist because it forced them to think in terms of novelty and new ways and really process all the freshness, that they were being bombarded with daily. I don't know how many of your listeners have been to Brazil, but uh, it is a visceral experience, from the air you breathe to the colors you see to the songs you hear, people making up songs on every street corner about what they're doing in their daily life. So Aquarel do Brasil just feels like such an inspired but obviously natural thing to come out of the trip.
And I'm smiling, Ted, because my wife, who's from Brazil, does that every day at home. Like
You,
she invents songs about everything she does. So
you lucky man.
it's very familiar. Tom and Michelle, I would say on my end, one of the really fun moments that dominates that whole project, and in part because it goes to the core of what the Hyperion Historical Alliance is, and what we do is in the collections that we got of photographs from Larry Landsberg, there was one photograph that wasn't taken directly during the trip, which was taken right after the trip, which was the Disney artists giving to the Argentine artist Molina Campos a beautiful, huge card that was signed by all of the artists that had been on the trip with drawings from all of them. And we had that photographs, that marvelous photographs in black and white, and with that card in there. And I was sharing with JB and said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could locate the original of that card? And Ted told me, well, I actually know where it is. It was shown in an exhibition a few years ago, I believe in Los Angeles, and I know where it is. And so it took after that a few months to actually contact the Molina Campos Foundation, who had the card, who had the original of the card, and they agreed to send a scan of that card. And so you now can see it in color on one page, and on the other page, obviously, the photograph of the artist delivering that card to Molina Campos. And so it's both the spirit of what we do in terms of preserving collections of Disney artists like Larry Landsberg, but also the collaboration aspect of all of the historians who have bits and pieces of knowledge, which when you put all of them together, you actually build the jigsaw puzzle.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That is
totally.
amazing
Wow.
stuff.
Yes. So, I mean, I know we want to be mindful of your time, but I just wanted to see, is there any other information, something that we didn't think to ask you, although we have a series of a bunch of questions we didn't get to, but what are some things that we didn't think of that are going to be important for people to think about in getting this book, or when they're reading this book, or anything else about the process?
So I'll let Ted and JB answer that one, because after that, I want to share another anecdote that came out of that project, but which is, as I mentioned earlier, linked to what comes next.
Well, again, I think that Disney's Good Neighbor project is such a wonderful overall entity that that each part of it kind of informs all the other parts. And I've always, the reason I got into film history is that I think that classic films of all kinds are much more enjoyable when you know something about them. And that's the racket that I'm in. And so I would say if you're already familiar with Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros, that's great. I would say read this monograph, absorb this monograph, and then see those films again, and see if that doesn't enrich your experience of viewing these films, and appreciating all of the inspiration that went into them.
I would even throw the net a little bit larger. Certainly, it's great to read the monograph and to appreciate the films and to appreciate the work of these great artists. But something that I've been impressed with every time I work with this material and talk with people about it is how everybody comes away with a sense of, wow, that was a time period when we really were interested in each other's cultures and we all benefited so much from that. And wouldn't it be great if we had a little bit more of that right now? So uh, I think that you will actually pick up that feeling when you get the monograph and enjoy it. And if so, spread it around, you know, spread that feeling around because it certainly can't hurt.
That's a great point. All right, DDA, we are on pins and needles.
So what I was going to share is the following. So one of the really fun discoveries also within that process is JB mentioned earlier the collection that Jim Holyfield had of photographs and documents from Jack Cutting. And within all of the photographs that he scanned for us, there were photographs that were taken in Mexico, which initially I thought, okay, those photographs are probably from the trip, from the 1941 trip. And then obviously Ted and JB looked at those photographs closer and they said, there is no way those photographs are from the 1941 trip. And the reason why there is no way is that those photographs actually show Walt in Xochimilco, the floating gardens of Mexico. And during the 1941 trip, Walt actually did not go to Mexico. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so what that made me realize is, and they told me, well, those photos are from a trip to Mexico City in December 1942. And I'm like, huh. I know, aside from a few paragraphs in JB's book, I know nothing about that trip to Mexico in December 1942. And then I started asking JB questions about the follow-up trips to Latin America, the ones to Mexico, the ones to Central America, and the ones to Cuba. And I realized that there was a bit of information on those, but that there was a massive story that remained to be told. And so we started researching, Ted, JB, Jim Holyfield, and myself. We started researching the follow-up trips, the one to Mexico and the one to Cuba, especially. And when we started that project, which is going to be the sequel, obviously, to the current El Grupo book, we pulled again our resources, and we realized that Ted had a few photos from the trip to Cuba, from one of the two trips to Cuba. Realized that I had a few photos from another trip to Cuba, but that amounted to about 30 photos in total. And then when we asked the Disney archives, they had any photos of the trips to Mexico City, they said, well, we have 2 photos. And we realized that they had a few more, but not many more. And so then I started using some local contacts in Mexico City. And by now, I think we're at 100 photos that had never been seen before from those various trips to Mexico, plus located some color photographs of one of the trips to Cuba. And so there is an amazing story to tell. And there is artwork also at the Animation Research Library at Disney that no one had seen before from that trip to Cuba. And so a project that started as a side project that would be maybe 100-page long, 150-page long, is now going to be another monograph the size of the first El Grupo monograph, with again 90% of material that no one will have seen before, and not just photos but also artwork and character designs and so on and so forth. And so that was sort of all starting with those photos from Xochimilco in Mexico that Ted and JB said, no, those aren't from the 1941 trip.
Wow, that's amazing. That is very cool.
Wow, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a follow-up, stuff you've never seen before. Maybe you've never even heard about these trips before, but that's going to be coming. And that's really, really exciting, right, Michelle?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you shared some of that at D23, right?
I did. I shared a little bit of that at D23. The other thing that happened at D23 is that when Ted, JB, and I were, and Ed Ovalle were preparing the presentation of the El Grupo monograph, and we're preparing also sort of that preview of the following trips to Mexico and Cuba. I thought about asking the Walt Disney Family Foundation if they had some footage of the trip to Cuba that might or Mexico that might be in their archives, and they said, well, we have footage from Cuba. And I'm like, and they said this is footage shot by Walt, and I'm like, this therefore means that this is not footage from the 1940s trip. This means that this is footage from the 1931 trip, which obviously we never expected and which had not been seen in 93 years. And so we presented that in exclusivity at D23 this year, and we were blown away because we discovered that just 6 weeks before the presentation. What's really amazing, Tom and Michelle, is how much new material can still be discovered, even about subject matters that we think have been explored in a lot of details. And I'll just give you one last example, and then let Ted and JB conclude. But basically, if you take the subject of Mickey Mouse and the 1930s, you would say, okay, the golden age of Disney, and then Mickey Mouse. So the most famous creation of Walt Disney and the golden age of the Walt Disney Studio. Everything has been said about this, and obviously a huge lot has been said about it, and a huge amount has been said really, really well by JB and David Gernstein in their massive book on Mickey Mouse. Now, obviously, there is a lot more to be shared about the shorts, and I'm sure that JB at some point will write some books about the Mickey Mouse shorts. But what I realized during the pandemic, when I was looking for a subject matter to explore that didn't rely on research at the Disney archives, is that there was a huge amount of never released material about the other career of Mickey Mouse, the career on stage, in live shows, in vaudeville shows, on radio, and also in parade floats all around the United States at Thanksgiving. And when you find all of those never seen before photographs, when you find all of those store windows that no one had seen before, when you find all of those photos from the stage shows and so on and so forth, realize, yeah, we knew that Mickey Mouse was a famous star in the 1930s, but I never realized how big he was in terms of a star, and not just in the US, but in the US and all around the world. And there is a whole aspect that really revolutionized at least my understanding of Mickey's career in the 1930s at that time. And obviously that's going to be the subject of a couple of new monographs that are going to be coming in the next few years. So anyway, that's just a few teasers about what comes next.
Oh, but so interesting. Like you said, how you kind of happened upon some of this material.
Yeah, there are actually quite a number of monographs that are in the works now, in various stages of preparation that cover so many different aspects of Disney history. I've got a few up my sleeve, and there are others coming from some of our other members too. So, we like to think that in Disney history there are the well-known milestones, but then there are all these nooks and crannies. And we love the nooks and crannies of Disney history, so we're exploring those. And
I mean, Tom and Michelle, just one last thing on my end, which is that one of the most exciting aspect of the monograph series, which is going to be coming starting hopefully next year, is that until now we have really focused on film history a lot. But there is obviously a whole aspect which is linked to parks history, Walt Disney Imagineering history. And there are a couple of monographs that are going to be coming. One about Disneyland 59 by Todd James Pierce and Joe Campana. That's going to deal with the history of the parks. But the other one is a series of 4 monographs by former Imagineer Tom Morris, which is absolutely going to revolutionize our understanding of the history of Walt Disney Imagineering. It's going to do for the history of Imagineering what some of the books by Michael Valley or J.B. Kaufman, for that matter, have done for animation. It's just going to reestablish the foundation of a whole subgenre of history of Disney, and it's just going to be an eye opener, really.
Can't wait for that.
Man, so much stuff coming down the pipeline. That's exciting.
Exciting things, yeah, for sure. Wow.
Ted, any last words from you before we sign this thing out?
Well, believe it or not, there is undiscovered historical footage within the Walt Disney Company that unfortunately it's misplaced or mislabeled, or nobody knows where it is. For example, the original 16 millimeter film that was shot on the El Grupo trip, we don't know where it is anymore. We for what I found for my project was what you would call the outtakes, and I made liberal use of all that material. But the original stuff that got worked into South of the Border with Disney and Saludos Amigos, nobody knows where it is. And then we also know that footage was shot by Larry Landsberg during one of these research trips to Cuba. We have snapshots of him there with a camera and a dolly doing some filming. So far, nobody knows where that is. But it's worth a data diving trip to Iron Mountain to try and find that and see where it might be lurking, because that would be real exciting to get into.
Or we might be finding it somewhere else. We will see.
Yes, stay tuned.
We'll see. We're still working on that.
Wow. Nice. Amazing. JB, also, I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. You have a new book based on Donald Duck, one of our favorite all-time characters. He's the everyman, every duck, coming out here this October, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit, give us a little preview into that book.
Well, I can tell you, you mentioned earlier that David Gerstein and I collaborated on the big book on Mickey Mouse. And that came out in 2018, which of course was Mickey's 90th birthday. And they immediately said, why don't you do a follow-up on Donald Duck? And I think at the time, nobody expected that one wouldn't come out until Donald's 90th birthday. But in fact, what was various delays, that's exactly what's going on. But it was a huge project. And I have to give a lot of credit to David Gerstein. I think that posterity in general and the Disney community in particular are going to really owe a huge debt to David when this book is published, because my thing is the films, and I love to delve into the films and the making of them and so on. And we discovered a lot. We were allowed to do a lot of deep research on the films. And David is knowledgeable about the films, but he's a bulldog when it comes to the comics, to the unproduced films, to the various television projects. He has really built up those sections. So I would say do your exercises so you can lift this thing when it comes out. And I'm really excited to see it finally seeing the light of day. It's been a long time hatching, if you'll pardon the expression, but I'm really excited to see it finally be realized this year.
We're excited about that as well. Definitely. So, but if that's coming in October, if you want to get more and get this book, Walt Disney and El Grupo in Latin America, or any of the other monographs that past, future, possibly coming up here. Of course, the other ones, The Making of Walt Disney's Fun and Fancy Free and The Origin of Walt Disney's True Life Adventures. Those are already out. Check out the Hyperion Yeah, I keep wanting to say our name, Hyperion Adventures, Hyperion Historical Alliance, for all their information. If you want to purchase those books, you can get them through stuartngbooks.com, as well as some of the other Hyperion Historical Alliance stuff as well, right, Michelle?
Right. And you can actually go on to their website. You can purchase the books with already autographed if they have them available. I know that the one that I got of the origins of Walt's True Life Adventures, DDA, I have your autograph now in that book. That's the one I purchased. And so many other great ones, and it's easy to order through them and get that sent to you. So we'll also include in our show notes.
Of course, yes, definitely ways to get involved with the Hyperion Historical Alliance, and of course, where you can get these books. But I mean, and listen, there's so much great stuff coming. They're still finding stuff every day, it sounds like. So much more to come. Much more to come, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today, showing your insight on this wonderful, wonderful monograph. It is a beautiful book. Everybody should check it out, and we just really, really appreciate you coming on the Hyperion Adventures podcast.
And it's just really also great to hear the collaboration you three had for this project, and it's just very touching to hear that as well.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for
so
hosting
much.
it. It's a great pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we'll do this again. But in the meantime, saludos, amigos, and thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Essas fontes murmurantes, foi onde eu mato a minha sede e onde a lua vem brincar. Oi, esse Brasil lindo e trigueiro é o meu Brasil brasileiro, terra de samba e pandeiro. Brasil, pra mim.
So thanks once again, Ted Thomas, J.B. Kaufman, Didier Ghez. What an amazing interview. What amazing people. And they were so generous with their time to join us on the show.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. Generous with their time, very open with the information they found and the processes, and just such kind and warm individuals that we were so blown away and so appreciative. And I can't emphasize enough how having these books, the book that we talked about and emphasized in the interview, as well as some of the other ones we talked about that you can get through Stuart Ng Books, you're going to be really enjoying that. And the new things that DDA introduces coming up in the future were just,
that's exciting stuff.
Totally.
I can't wait to hear all about that as well. But I mean, we talked about it before we started in the early part of it. We didn't get through all, I mean, here's all our questions here.
Yeah.
We didn't get through half of the stuff that we wanted to ask, because that's how good they were in going through this topic and how many interesting stories and fascinating facts that they had. So hopefully we can get them on again. Maybe we'll talk about this topic, but obviously they have a lot of stuff coming down through the Hyperion Historical Alliance, and we can't wait to hopefully get with them on that as well.
Sure, yes.
Yeah. But I'm just going to recount, if you're looking for this again, if you're interested, Hyperion Historical Alliance, check them out. You can find them online everywhere. If you on social media, they're HHA Press everywhere. You can find them there. But if you're looking to purchase this monograph or some of the other Hyperion Historical Alliance monographs, stuartngbooks.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Ng books, as you would know, .com. Check it out. It's a beautiful book with lots of cool facts, and we think you really, really will enjoy it.
Most definitely.
Now, before we get to the Disney stories of the week, well, we are doing our Year of Lynn, and so that means we need to get back to another portion of our Year of Lynn as we do our best effort to get Lin-Manuel Miranda to join this show sometime before, well, somewhere about by middle summer of next year. We'll be doing this every week. And as we just discussed, our episode today was all about Walt Disney's trip to Latin America and what it meant for the company. Well, Lin-Manuel Miranda also traveled south to prepare for a Disney film not that long ago.
Really?
Yes. This came from NPR.com. They said Lin-Manuel Miranda traveled to Colombia with crew members to learn about the country's history for Encanto.
Makes sense.
Yeah, totally. To prepare for Encanto, Lin-Manuel Miranda traveled with his father, Luis, and the filmmaking team in 2018. During a 2-week research trip, they met with architects, botanists, and families. Kind of sounds a little bit familiar to Walt and El Grupo there.
Right.
Yep. Lin had this to say about the trip. He said, "We all gravitated towards Colombia because it's kind of the home of magical realism in literature and culture. We went to Cartagena, we went to Bogota, we went to the town of Palenque, and we went up into the mountains to a town called Barichara, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sort of explored the incredible diversity of Colombian culture and life and listened to music at every stop on our journey." Speaking about Colombia, Miranda called it the place, quote, "where the world is just a little more spiritual and a little more magical than everywhere else," end quote. And I love that.
Yes.
And I love that there's, it kind of was obviously these, as the authors brought up, that a lot of these animators and these filmmakers are now traveling to their destinations to help make these films. And it all started with Walt and El Grupo and Lin-Manuel Miranda carrying that on through newer Disney films.
Right, exactly. It just, you can appreciate then the film's authenticity so much more because of the research that they did prior to making the films.
Couldn't agree more with that. So there we go. Another portion of our year of Lin and how he is just amazing, and hopefully will be on our show sometime by next July. Well, I think our goal is like around the July 4th time of next year. We'll see what happens with that. But now, before we get to the Disney stories of the week, we have to talk about another great guy, our wonderful friend Nate with Main Street and More Travel. Because let's face it, we all have trips we're thinking about taking in the very near future. Well, if you do, whether it be to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Cruise, or anywhere in the world beyond, let me tell you, Nate is the certified Disney vacation planner that you are going to want to get in contact with.
Oh my gosh, for sure. As we, mention all the time, he really has firsthand knowledge of things, so he can really help you plan, customize a trip that is going to be the best for you, answer your questions. It's really concierge level planning that doesn't cost you anything.
High end. It is high end stuff that he will help you out with, answer all your questions. He is there for you to make sure your trip, wherever it may be the best it possibly can be. And as Michelle mentioned, no extra cost to you. That's because either Disney or whatever other travel branch that he works through pays him for you. What you end up paying is exactly what you pay if you did all that work yourself. Only you can save that time and just relax and enjoy and let him set it all up for you.
Right. And you know what? He may even be able to save you some money from you doing it alone, because he is on top of all the deals and steals that are out there.
Yeah. There's never a guarantee, but let me tell you, if there's a discount out there, Nate will find it for you. So what you got to do is go to distripsandmore.com, fill out the form there, and just contact him, talk to him, tell him what you want to do, and let him get to work for you.
Right. So as Tom mentioned, once you fill out that form, Nate will be back in touch with you to start that planning, but be sure to tell him that Tom and Michelle sent you.
Yeah. Again, that's Nate with Main Street and More Travel. All right, let's quickly get to these Disney stories of the week. It's been a long episode, but we do want to get to a few things here, including a new food and wine foodie guide is out. That's right, for the Epcot International Food and Wine Festival, which is kicking off here in just a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go through the whole foodie guide because it's amazing. There's a lot of stuff on there. Food and wine. Surprising, there's a lot of food and wine. But we have decided that we're going to do this now whenever a foodie guide comes out for some of these major events, not the little simple ones, but for some of the festivals, etc. We are going to pick out the 3 new things that we want to try and the 3 classic things or things that are returning that we want to try. So let's go ahead and do them. When we do this, whenever we do a list, we start with Michelle. So because her list is going to be the best list. So let's go ahead, Michelle. Let's get to the first. Are we going to start with new items that we want to try?
Sure.
What your first new item you want to try?
Okay, and because this episode was going long, I did keep everything to the 3. I didn't do A's and B's. So my first thing, it's actually kind of, if you think of what's going on, rather a simple concept, but it's from the Communicore Hall, the truffle macaroni and cheese. I think that's going to be amazing to try out, and looking forward to it.
Yes, as a matter of fact, my first thing is also, but I just encompassed it together with the Macatizers menu at Communicore Hall.
whole thing, huh?
The whole thing, because it fits our family so perfectly. Like there is a traditional mac and cheese. That's perfect for Scott. He's
Right.
going to love that. A cheesesteak mac and cheese with shaved beef, peppers, and onions. That's perfect for me. And as we just proved, the truffle mac and cheese, which is perfect for you. So, and plus,
Yeah.
I want to see how Communicore Hall is laid out for a festival now, because I think that's kind of what we've been talking about. We need to wait and see what it's all
Right.
about.
Exactly.
So excited for that. So
Yes.
so we kind of agree on that one.
Right. And they actually have, I would go kind of coincide with what you're saying. I think all of them would be great to sample. And they also will have a plant-based one that they're offering as well, which I'm also interested, but considering, looking at our favorite 3 and just keeping it to 3.
They also have a 50-year celebration Camus Cabernet Sauvignon
Right.
that I love. It's a bit pricey, and I don't know what they're going to price it at here. It's a bit pricey, but I love it, and I know it would pair beautifully with these mac and cheeses.
sure.
So we may have to pick that up as well. We'll see what the price is, but maybe. All right, what's the next on your list?
From the Mexico Pavilion, the new tostada de camarones. It's a tempura battered shrimp on top of a fried corn tortilla. It has guacamole, cabbage, chipotle aioli, some diced mangoes, and chili lime powder. I think looking at the picture and knowing the great foods that we've had in the past from the Mexico Pavilion, I am dying to try that.
Yeah, Mexico is almost always one of our must-hit booths because there's always at least one dish, usually a couple dishes that we really want to get from them. And this is good because we are going to be going to the same places, because that is also one of my new dishes, but not that one specifically, although I do want to try that one. That one's very good. But the one that made my list was the flauta de barbacoa, which is a fried tortillas filled with barbacoa beef topped with salsa verde, crema mexicana, and queso fresco, again from Mexico. This is good. We're not like walking all over the park to get our food. Like we're pinpointing together where we're going to want to go.
It's nice that it's working out this time.
Yeah. So what do you have next?
All right. So my third one actually comes from the France Pavilion, brioche au escargot. I love escargot. I love
You do.
brioche. I love garlic and cream. So I think that one's going to be a major hit.
They had something similar last year, but I think it was served in a different type of breading,
Yeah, it was
right?
a croissant.
Yeah, so this is a little different. So it's a new dish technically, but that does sound good. Well, I like escargot too. Not nearly as much as Michelle does, but I do like escargot, and I'll probably try that as well. So this is where we're going to differ finally a little bit.
Yeah.
For my third new dish that I want to try, I'm going to head over to what will be between Italy and Germany, and that is the Spain booth. I want to try the new Spanish charcuterie with jamon, manchego cheese, and pan con tomate. I love a charcuterie plate, and that sounds perfect. They have some nice wines there as well to pair along with it. I think that's something I definitely want to try for sure.
Yeah, I actually was thinking you were going to pick their other item.
Which is the Blanco.
It's the paella negra.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, I was thinking about that one too. That one is
The paella negra.
Yeah, that one looks very good too.
Yeah.
So that might be worth dipping into the Spanish booth for both those items.
Yeah.
for
That
sure.
one might be a little bit more for some people, a little bit more adventurous, even for myself. But the
Yeah.
squid ink rice with obviously than the shrimp, bay scallops.
I believe they have a
and
nice
octopus.
sangria there that sounds pretty good. That might
Yeah,
go along
yeah.
with both those dishes. So we might be trying that. All right. What about returning dishes? Where are you going first for dishes that are coming back from last year or years past?
Okay, for returning from the Australia cart, their roasted lamb chop. It has mint pesto, crushed salt and vinegar, potato chips. I've always loved the food that they've had at their Australian cart, and I love the lamb chop that they had there. And they also have a nice wine to pair it with. So I'm going for that again.
Australian lamb is pretty good. That was probably something that I would want to try as well. For me, this is easy. This is my favorite booth. I have to hit it. It's been there for 2 years straight, and I have to go back to it. It's the Fry Basket near Refreshment Station and the Fry Flight, which has truffle parmesan fries, barbecue bacon fries with smoked aioli, and sweet potato casserole fries with candied pecans, toasted marshmallow cream, and bourbon maple syrup. It is like it hits all the notes when you combine them together because, one's a little saltier, savory, one's a little smoky, one's a little sweet. And so as you kind of go through it, it's like a perfect flight of French fries. It's amazing.
Most definitely. And if you've had it last year, there is one little change to it. They took out the salt and vinegar fries and they've replaced it with the
Truffle Parmesan.
truffle parmesan. So that sounds really
Might even
amazing.
be better. I don't
Yes.
know. I can't wait to find out. But yeah, very good. And I also want to try the yuca fries while we're there as well.
right.
Because those are really good too. So that's my booth. What's next for you?
So my next thing, and it's funny, it's a returning thing, but we haven't tried it, or I haven't tried it. I don't know if you have. Is the Brazilian cheese bread from the Brazil booth. I know
Fits right in today's topic.
I know, and I looking back at last year, for example, because I know a lot of people, especially a lot of cast members, were recommending that to us. We either got there when the booth was pretty busy, or we were already too full by the time we got to that part of the park that we just couldn't, add cheese bread into our stomachs at that time. But this year, going to make the effort to make sure that's something that we do get to.
Yeah, definitely. It's bread, it's cheese. Well, I'm all over
I
it.
know.
Those
I
are
know.
two of my favorite things in the world. Definitely going to try them. Next one for me, we're back to Communicore Hall, so we can just kind of hit this up while we're there as well. From the Festival Favorites booth, where right now they're serving the arepas, but it's a new festival favorite during this time. And it's the kielbasa and potato pierogies with caramelized onion and sour cream.
Looks pretty
I
good.
love a good pierogi.
Me too,
I love kielbasa. I'm all over this dish.
Yeah, that one almost made my list as well. It does look tremendous, and yeah, that'll be good.
Very good. So let's finish it out. What's your third and final returning dish from the Food and Wine Festival you want to try?
My third one, another French dish, I guess, but this time from the Canada Pavilion, and that's their filet mignon with mushrooms. So that's always a big hit in my book. It's always very delicious. The meat is cooked really nicely and tender, and yes.
Very good. Yep, that sounds really good too. For me, this is a new booth, but I believe this is a returning item. Just switched to a new booth. The booth is Bramblewood Bites, which is between the Imagination Pavilion and World Showcase, if you want to look for that. And it's the cast iron roasted Brussels sprouts and root vegetables with dried cranberries, candied pecans, and maple bourbon glaze. If it's like the dish, I think it's the dish we tried last year, and it hits all the notes. It's savory, it's sweet, it's earthy. It's got some good texture with the pecans. It just really hits it all. And then they had that Gogi Pinot Noir there to go along with it, which we know we have to hit up. So that's why it's going to be one of the dishes that I need to try.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a wonderful, wonderful dish to once again have.
So that's it. We're excited. So much good food on that list. Like there's a ton. Like I had to narrow it down, and it was tough because can't be more excited, especially since we've had a break from a festival to get back there and try some of these festival foods.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. So just a couple more stories I want to get to really, really quickly here. Peter Pan's flight reopened at Walt Disney World after a 6-week refurbishment with some changes. The attraction had been closed since July 8th and reopened on Friday, and this was exciting to me. I was very happy to see that this happened. They updated the Native American scene with something much more representative to the culture itself, because when we love Peter Pan's Flight, we're not often willing to wait the 45 minutes plus for it, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes, whatever, for it. But when we do get the opportunity, whether we're there at rope drop or whether we're there for later in the evening when the line is much shorter, we love that attraction. But every time I would come around to that scene, it was always a bit cringy to me. I love what they've done with it, at least from what the videos that we've seen from people who have ridden it. We have not rode it yet, but I'm very excited to see it. I'm very happy they made that change.
Yeah. And like you said, just excited to try that out and see that change. And it is pretty cool.
Yeah. Very happy about that. Very, very happy that they did that. And apparently they're going to be doing that soon at the other versions of Peter Pan's Flight in Disneyland and at some of the Asian parks as well to coincide with that. And that's good all the way around. Finally, there's an updated seasonal Coco show coming to the Disneyland Resort. A new Plaza de Familia show. It's called The Storytellers of Plaza de la Familia celebrate the musical world of Coco. It's a long name, just like our name, so I love it that much more. Will be performed several times daily at Disney California Adventure Park beginning on August 30th. If you've seen the concept art for it, it looks similar to what has been there in the past, but it just looks like they took it to the next level. It looks like the puppets are set up differently and better, and it looks like there's more performers. Maybe the show it's a musical celebration, so they always had the music playing, but maybe they're going to take that even further.
Right.
So I'm excited to see what that show is all about. We aren't going to get out there for this time, but happy for anybody who's going to get to experience it soon.
Definitely. Yeah. And if you get an opportunity, definitely check
let
it
us
out.
know what you thought of it, because we love Coco. And, more Coco in the parks. We know they've got the attraction coming to Disneyland sometime in the next few years, but just happy that there's more Coco out there.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a beloved film that has great music.
Definitely. So that's it for the Disney Stories of the Week. However, we never leave you without giving you some sort of tip that might help you on your next vacation. And when we do this, we always start with Shell because she's wonderful. She's great. She's all things good in the world. You know, she does the best research. Pretty much on par with our guest from earlier today.
No, not even close. I aspire to try to be as good as they are.
She definitely has the best list. You just heard that a little bit ago, but she always has the best tips. So let's go ahead and get to it. Here is Michelle's tip of the week.
So my tip has to do with a potential way of getting some big discounted Disney merch. And that is through stores there's a few of them called the Disney's Character Warehouse. Think of it as an outlet store for Disney items. It's a store that you may find some real treasures at a great price, or maybe you don't find anything on a particular trip that meets your fancy. There's 2 locations in Orlando and one in Sunrise, Florida, which is actually near Fort Lauderdale. And for this month, they also are holding an annual pass holder discount, 20% discount for the month of August. And in fact, they've been running this on Thursdays. And so the next couple Thursdays in August, they open the doors of the store from 9 to 10 a.m. exclusively for Disney annual pass holders. So you can get into the store with maybe less folks there at that time. But we've gone there and been amazed at some of the items that they've had and some of the prices. We've actually found things that we've purchased, in the past that now is at a great price. Not, that we've been disappointed. It's just like, wow, that's really great prices that they put these things to.
Yeah, I kind of compare it to, like stores like Ross and Marshall's, if you know what those are all about. Like you go there and they have all sorts of items there. Usually there's some reason they're there. They've been discontinued or whatever it might be. And that kind of is the case with a lot of these Disney items you'll find there. But you can find some real gems if you do some searching and look through them.
Right.
You can find some amazing pieces that are at a really, really good price. So it's worth, taking the time out there every once in a while to just look through it. You may come away with nothing, or you may come away with a super wonderful haul of amazing stuff for a pretty decent price.
Right. So if you have a car and you're in that area, obviously, because there's one on Vineland Ave and one on International Drive. And I'm not suggesting there's a need to do this, but if you're at the parks and you don't have a car, the one on Vineland is the one that's closest to the park that you could take a ride share to as well. You might really be able to bring home some nice souvenirs.
It's worth stopping by and checking it out. You never know what you might come away with.
Right.
For my tip this week, look, whether you check us out for some of Michelle's amazing research pieces, or whether you pick up some of these phenomenal monographs, the books, all that stuff like these being put out by the Hyperion Historical Alliance. I still always want to say Hyperion. I've been trained for 6 years to say Hyperion Adventures, Hyperion Historical Alliance. You should delve into the history of Disney and the Walt Disney Company as a whole, because there are so many events and moments that shape the parks and the movies that we all love, but also shape the world. I mean, if you delve more into these books and into these research and into these stories, the documentaries, all this stuff, you'll see how the world has been in part shaped by the Walt Disney Company and Walt himself, and how culture has changed thanks to them. And it gives you a different perspective when you go to the parks, when you watch the movies, once you have found out a lot of the history behind it.
Right. You can appreciate it so much more in your experience, and you may find things that you wouldn't have, hidden gems that you wouldn't have recognized or noticed otherwise.
Exactly. So definitely check all this stuff out for sure, because there's some amazing work being done, and there's some amazing history out there that will help enhance your Disney journey.
Definitely.
Sure. So that's it for this week's show. Next week, well, we're going to look back into more history. It's all about our favorite magical nanny. We'll be talking about the 60th anniversary of Mary Poppins, right, Michelle?
That's right. So hopefully we'll be able to share with you some really, maybe some things that you might not be as aware of, or some things that you may have forgotten, but I think you're going to enjoy it.
And hopefully it'll enhance your next viewing of Mary Poppins as well. I wonder if Lin-Manuel Miranda might play a part in some of this. Maybe. It is the year of Lynn. We'll see. As for today's show, we appreciate that you join us today. In the future, you can find us most everywhere you get podcasts. However, the very best place to find us is on our own website, HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. Also, we are on social media. We're on Twitter at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. If you are on Facebook, come on over and join us for some good, positive Disney energy fun on our Hyperion Adventurers Facebook group. Also, we're on YouTube. If you want to find us there, we're at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. And if you ever want to contact us for any reason, please hit us up at our Gmail account, HyperionAdventuresPodcast@gmail.com.
We also want to share with you that we do have a Spreadshirt shop that you can purchase some of our logos, our various logos. Tom's done some tremendous artwork with them. And that's on if you go to our Linktree account, you can find that. And it's not just shirts. There's a lot of other type of products there that you can find, things for people of all ages, and for some of your maybe furry friends.
Yeah, we even have stuff for your fur babies as well. Yeah, you can find it. Go to our website. There's a page on there to get you there.
Right.
Or you can go to any of our social medias. Go to our profile page. There's a Linktree account there, and it'll be listed in amongst all of those different links that are there.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to get there.
Yeah, and Tom's done one recently that is kind of an Avengers theme, lettering and everything, and it looks really cool. I get a lot of compliments when I wear that, whether I wear it at the parks or even just outside. I've had people really compliment it. So.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely check it out for sure. For sure. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Hyperion Adventures podcast. We look forward to sharing some time with you again next week. Until that time, I'm Tom.
I'm Michelle.
And we hope that you have a magical week.
Bye.